verse 34. Chapter 14, verse 34. Now, we're going to read about Gennesaret, another city. And Gennesaret was a city that was only actually about, when I was looking at the map, 12, 15 miles maybe 20, somewhere in that, not very far, next to Nazareth. Gennesaret was actually right on the shore of what they call Lake Gennesaret, or it was also called the Sea of Galilee. So they weren't very far away from these other people, but yet they were a people that was just 180 degrees from the people of Nazareth. And we'll pick it up here, but I'll point out to you that this is just a few scriptures over from where the Lord and Peter and the apostles were out on the Sea of Galilee, and Peter had just went through the experience of walking on water. So they had come to shore here. So Matthew 14, 34. And when they were gone over, that's the Sea of Galilee, when they had gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all that country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased. My goodness, what a difference.
Yes.
And besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched were made perfectly whole. Now, what a difference just 10 to 15 miles makes to people. You know what I mean? But these people, apparently, I kind of suspect that back around chapter 9 in Matthew, it talks about the lady of the issue of blood. And she had come and struggled through the crowd and touched the hem of Jesus' garment. And a miracle happened. And the Lord even recognized it. She touched it because the virtue. But based on these scriptures here, I kind of, at least in my own mind, I surmise that that spread. The knowledge of that news spread. You know, it got around.
Yes.
Because these people here pressed the Lord, sought after him, beseeched him that, Lord, just if we could just touch your garment, that's all we need. You know? And that's what they did. And there were many that, as many as touched, were made perfectly whole. So these people had no problem with Jesus growing up. Now, I suspect that some of them, you know, not that much distance between the cities. I suspect some of them probably knew that this was the son of Mary and Joseph the carpenter. I suspect that maybe Joseph's work maybe even took him over into Gennesaret sometime. The carpenter had to get out and do work. But they had no problem with it. Okay? And so consequently, they got the benefit of the miracles. So what's the difference? What made the difference? Choice. Choice. It all boils down to choice. What we choose. What we choose to believe or not to believe. And it's always been that way from the very beginning. If you look all the way back, free will has the free will and the ability to choose what we want to do has been there, and that's what's made the difference. We look at Lucifer, and a third of the angels used their free will to choose to disobey. So what it cost them. And we look at Joshua. Joshua said, "Choose this day whom you will serve." So it's always been about choice, free will. And if you remember from the past few weeks, we've talked about salvation, and that's a personal choice too. We have to choose to accept God's salvation plan. We have to choose that. And not only must we choose that, we have to choose to pick up our cross. Remember, we talked about that. Because if you don't choose to pick up, He's not going to force it on you. But if you don't choose to pick it up, you're not going to be worthy of it. That's what the Word says. We covered that a couple of weeks ago. And we have to choose to trust Him, believe in Him with our whole heart. We can't do anything less. He will not accept it. We have to choose to commit ourselves 100%. Because if we choose, well, I'm only going to put 50% of my effort into this for the Lord, that's a choice we make. And that's not going to get the job done either. We have to choose to completely commit to it. And that involves faith. Okay? Without faith, it's impossible to please God. I want to talk about faith a little bit. I'm going to go over 2 Corinthians. Now, sometimes it seems like, and we also kind of covered this in the past few weeks too, but it seems like there's a difference in people, just like there was here with the citizens of Nazareth and the citizens of Gennesaret. Some people seem to just, Lord, if you could just show me one more miracle. Demonstrate your power just one more time. Maybe think about Gideon. Remember when we read about him? And he said, well, okay, you made the cloth wet and the ground dry. Now, just show me one more time. Make the cloth dry and the ground wet. Then I'll believe you. Because Gideon had this problem. He said, Lord, you need to show me this, convince me, because I may be making this voice up in my head, and if I listen to it and go out here, I might get myself killed. So he wasn't sure that it was God talking to him or whether he was making it up in his own mind. So anyhow, Gideon had to be convinced several times, actually, remember. But now that versus the Hebrew children. Remember we talked about them. Now, in their case, they didn't have an opportunity to say, well, to get a demonstration from God first. For God, for God to show them, to warm up, so to speak, before they actually went into the furnace. Okay? They had to make their decision then and there. And they hadn't, as we discussed, they hadn't had the benefit of seeing Daniel go into the lion's den because he hadn't been there yet. So the difference in our own minds is where it's at. It's what we choose. It's what we choose to do, what we choose to believe. And we even have the experience of Daniel. He went into the lion's den. We just have to choose to believe God. Now there's a term that is out there today that I've heard all my life actually. But it's called hard audience. You ever heard that term?
What's that?
Hard audience. Now, it's usually used in the entertainment world when you have a comedian or somebody, they're up and they're trying to break the crowd, so to speak. And they'll say, well, it's a hard audience to me. They just couldn't quite get to. Well, what happens is people come to these events or whatever, and their mind is preconditioned. Okay, it's for whatever reason, the problems they had during the day, or something going on in the family, something has got their mind kind of messed up. Okay, so it's off on something else. So when they get there, the entertainer or whoever it is has a hard time getting them to let go of that and get involved in what he's relating to. So I think sometimes that's what happens to us if we're not careful when we come to church, myself included. If we've had a rough day, or there's always conflicts in life. You come out, you come to church, and your mind is just kind of all tangled up. And essentially, we are or become a hard audience. The song leader or the worship leader or the pastor, they have to really strive and work to get our minds to where it needs to be if we're going to worship the Lord. So the first thing we need to do is try to get a hold of our own minds. Okay? It's our mind, and we control it. And not be a hard audience. Not be a type of person that God is going to have to show over and over and over again that He loves us. In the first place,